This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today I'm honored to have LaSean Smith from CAGR Investments. He's the founder of that company. And we're going to talk a lot about AI, tech investments. We're going to talk about technology, low-code automation, and how leaders can use this stuff and learn more about it. And what do we need to know in the field when it comes to what's going on with low-code automation and AI. Anyway, with all that being said, LaSean, welcome to the show.
Hey, John. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing and where this all started and where it's going for you.
Sure. Well, I'll go way back and say I love to celebrate the fact that I have a very random path. I started back in college very long time ago when the computer science program actually didn't have a lot of coding classes, and I ended up switching to CIS so I could do more programming and less, data structures and compilers. And maybe that was the cop out, but that led me down a path where I really wanted to understand. Back then software was more client server, but the programming side of things was really what got me excited as it related to technology. Ended up doing a whole kind of realm of things, desktop support. I guess that was my IT stint. But, once I got into the workplace for real, I did a rotation starting as a front-end engineer, ended up in UX design, technical architect, startup CTO. So a number of stops. But after business school, I focused primarily on product management, product strategy, and managing multidisciplinary teams. I did stints at Amazon and Microsoft managing engineers and PMs there. And now I'm a full-time investor. I focus on micro private equity, specifically digital businesses, largely SaaS, under $10 million. And I'm really excited with this new wave of technology that is empowering these small companies. And so that's where I spend the bulk of my time. That's also where I'm most excited.
Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff coming out right now. I mean, I've been playing around with, ChatGPT and Bard and all these AI tools, and with Microsoft just doing things with Power Automate, our company's been using that for quite a bit to help automate some of the paper workflows that go around the office. Where are you guys seeing kind of the biggest growth from these smaller companies that are starting out that are obviously you're looking for that unicorn?
Sure. Well, two things. First, we are really focused on free cash flow, and that's a little different than how much of the VC audience looks at enterprise software. And the reason is, number two, I really believe we're at a tipping point where there's going to be a new class of software startup. And so, maybe I'll rewind a bit more. At a high level, one of the big industry trends that, my analyst has continue to try to poke holes at, right? So we have this thesis and we continue to attack it to say, like, this looks very clear. Can we find holes in this thinking? And so far it is holding up. But at a high level, the logic path follows like this. So you may be familiar with the Coase theorem. Ronald Coase, he's a economist from back in the day. And basically what that says is, a business is going to determine if they're going to kind of buy or build, do something in-house or through a vendor based upon the internal versus external cost. And what we're seeing is that the internal costs for a number of business expenses are starting to exceed external costs. And what that means is big companies can, do more outside of their core business. And from that, I think the biggest companies, the large platform players, Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, they're going to get bigger. A new class of small companies are going to expand in the market, and many of these mid-market players are going to start to disappear, maybe through acquisition or simply going out of business. And more companies are going to make the decision to stay small on purpose. And so you're probably familiar with, rules like the popular rule of 40 for SaaS products. Salesforce popularized that. And that's basically where you take your growth rate and profit margin. You're doing a blended metric to say, hey, we're making money and we're growing. And as long as that number combines over 40, you are directionally accurate. But increasingly, the way that VCs invest, we believe, is going to shift. And the idea that you're just trying to get to your next stage, from your seed A, B, C, what you're really trying to do is to figure out, how defensible is the revenue stream. And so this is all, I think, very fascinating because if you look at the kind of the largest, most profitable companies, Alphabet, Apple, Meta, and it's not just technology, Visa, MasterCard, they have revenue per employee around $500,000 to about $2 million. And what I believe we're going to see is that's going to, 3 to 5x at some of these small software companies where the revenue per employee is going to really explode. And we're going to see this new class of SaaS company that, has very intentionally kept itself very small. And I have a list of kind of drivers on why that, is true. I can run through those quickly. But, number one is, to your point, AI-enabled software. And it's not just about the AI. It's really about, this promise of digitization that's been around for, over a decade now, kind of digital transformation. It is finally forcing folks to rethink their core process. And now we're at a point where it's not just about, all right, let's digitize the workflow or the process. And many times it's, let's automate this. And even moving beyond RPA and things like that, it's like, all right, let's go fully headless. Let's have no human in this particular process because that was just a throwback and an outdated process that we no longer need. So that's, I think, one of the big ones is, AI-enabled software is really accelerating digital transformation. The others that I'll call out is, the pandemic and remote work has really accelerated async communication. I'm a big document writer. I learned that at my time at Amazon and my time as a consultant, like write things down. And that allows us to work, with teams all across the world more efficiently, fewer meetings. For smaller companies, there's more access to fractional talent. And so you don't necessarily have to hire a super expensive person full time. You can get folks on a fractional basis, and not just junior talent, but now increasingly very senior talent. As far as sales, two things here. One, organic marketing is really finding its way to B2B. And so it's not just about, kids dancing on TikTok, but, Twitter and LinkedIn and other channels are really finding their way for kind of organic channels. And then finally, more and more, we're seeing that sales is moving to a kind of near zero negotiation place for smaller companies. And so it's not, here's our rate card, call for pricing, we'll negotiate to optimize for, kind of the best ACR or other type of metric for that particular customer. It's like, no, our pricing's on the website. And that just cuts out a fair amount of back and forth on the sales pipeline, the friction, but also the number of, sales reps and other folks that you need to manage that process. So, I'll pause there, but, you can see there's a bunch of things that we are looking at that are driving this trend that, we think expands the market. It's, again, not saying, hey, big companies are just going to become tiny. No, there's a whole class of scenarios that were never profitable. And some of these drivers are going to allow software to play in some industries and use cases that had previously been untouched.
Yeah, no, I see that trend. When you spell it out here, now I can go back and I think in my head how, 10 years ago when I was buying software at a different company, when everything was negotiable. Everything was negotiable, and you negotiated everything. And now it's like, we were just looking at a product. I don't want to say the company's name, but basically they did their demo and they said our pricing is on the website. And I said, is there any room for negotiation of this? They said, absolutely not. It's just on the website. That's just what it is. And we don't even take your orders. You have to go to the website to like sign up, to get it.
Yeah, I mean, there's still terms and other things sometimes that we're seeing that are negotiated. But even then, the click-through agreements are becoming more and more popular. It used to be that the procurement side, on the buyer side, they would draft an MSA or some custom piece of paper. You'd have to get lawyers involved. Like, even that is being streamlined. And so a lot of that friction, again, just it takes a lot of the time that was traditionally spent, with the CFO and the procurement team, and shifts it to whoever the sponsor and the core buyer is, which is, many times going to be a VP or a GM who's actually buying the product. And it just pushes that sales process along much more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And are we seeing like newer tools that are helping out with some of these processes as well, like ChatGPT, as far as are people using these tools for like summarizing the MSA or even creating them at some point?
Yeah, I haven't seen much on the legal side here for corporate documents and SaaS. And again, that's my focus area, so I don't want to speak out of turn for some of the other places that may be happening. However, on the marketing and sales automation side, it is already on its way. And so, whether it is, copywriting, to me, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I don't think it's quite there yet, and I'll kind of share my point of view on that. But sales automation, when you need to, reply to folks in your pipeline, not only in a timely fashion, but you want to have all the context of the complete conversation. The idea of products like Apollo.io, where they are automating emails, they're drafting the responses, they're not hitting send, but you go in and your draft folders are, ready for you to redline and edit. That's a super powerful unlock. And I think much of that work is going to be fully automated. And again, you as the sales rep or sales manager, you may still be the last line of kind of final Q&A, where you become more of an editor in chief and you're kind of screening it before it goes out. But these emails are getting really good really quickly. And so I'm very bullish on kind of the sales automation side. Flipping it to some of the popular tools, and, I'll go kind of one level up from ChatGPT, popular tools like Copy.ai, Jasper, Word Hero, these types of tools. They're interesting, and I do believe they're powerful. At the same time, the nuance, especially in B2B, we've played with these tools. There's an agency that we worked with to kind of see like how far can you kind of push the output, and it just ends up being very generic. And so, there might be a place for, some SEO arbitrage. I think that'll be short-lived, where, you'll be able to, write more blog content. However, humanizing your brand and telling, personal stories, either from the leadership team or from customers, that is where we see, a lot of B2B organic marketing going. And these tools are just not going to be able to originate that. Where they will be valuable is in proofreading or, using something like the pillar strategy. And what that is to anchor on some type of hero content. Maybe it's a blog post that you write, with a human, you edit with some type of AI tool, but then use the AI tools to go break this down. So you take that newsletter or you take that blog post and you, reformat it for Twitter threads or for a LinkedIn post or, speaking points for a podcast. Like, there are all sorts of ways to leverage these tools more as an assistant than, kind of fully offsourcing or outsourcing the work.
Yeah, that's what, when Microsoft did a little demo with Copilot, showing you how it's more of an assistant, I see a lot of value in that, more than I do, just having ChatGPT write your whole process for you.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it was amazing to watch that demo where, they were just showing, I joined the meeting, like, can you summarize the meeting? And all of a sudden you see like summary points pop up on the side. You can kind of catch up without having to delay
delay everything, and you can have reminders sent out with meeting notes automatically instead of spending, an hour or so typing up meeting notes and sending that out. It just, I think having that extra piece of software that just adds value quickly like that is where you're really going to get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, 100%. And you hit on something really important here. There, as with a lot of new technologies, there will be there's some fear and there's some FUD kind of tramping around. I'm not in the camp that we can stop this,
Yeah.
primarily because now that people know, they've read the PDFs and the papers. Some of these models are quite expensive to recreate, but we're talking single digit millions of dollars today. And that means, in 3 or 4 years, you'll be able to train one of these models for $500,000 or $1 million. And so you won't need permission to go and recreate this. And so anyone who thinks we can stop this through regulation or, industry consortiums, we will not be able to stop it. So we should figure out, both for the societal reasons and the business reasons, how to best integrate it into the workplace. But the piece that you hit on that I do think we should keep an eye on is the kind of the source of truth for this data. And that's why Microsoft and some of these other companies, I believe, are going to be best positioned. And so, if you're a small business or a solopreneur or someone, who controls all of their data, you can go to any of these tools, try them out. If they work, fantastic. If you are, a large enterprise company or even a mid-sized company, you should really be thoughtful around whether you want your company's corpus of data round tripping to the retraining pipeline for some of these ML models. Like, that should be a huge question mark. And I don't think it's I think there's a ton of security risk there. But again, I don't know, right? And so what I really find interesting with the approach from Microsoft is they're leveraging the Microsoft Graph. And so they've already done the foundational work to say, and this is a framework that TK Cater has kind of articulated. If you look at the value chain and where the most valuable parts of kind of an enterprise stack are, your system of record is the most valuable. And historically, that's been structured data in a relational database. Increasingly, that expanded to unstructured, kind of Mongo, NoSQL type things. Now we're seeing this emergence of vector databases where you can put even less structured data in there. But regardless of the data store, someone has to go put their corporate data someplace, right? Some data lake, et cetera. And then on top of that, you have your system of engagement. What are the apps you build on top of that? And then on top of that, you have your systems of intelligence. What actions and insights do you find from looking at that? And the idea that some random startup is going to be the steward of your system of record, to me, is kind of silly. And so if you look at the companies that are already trusted for that data, it might be Zoom to record your call instead of Otter or Fireflies. It might be, Microsoft or Salesforce, like any place where the data already sits, I think are going to be very valuable surface areas. Slack is another great example. And if the conversation is happening there, if the data is already stored, in an Oracle database, those are going to be the places that you then link to these large language models, rather than kind of suck all of your data out of your corporate data store, send to some, platform provider and send back. Like, there's so many risks there that I think some of these big players are going to be able to defend their moat and add this to their stack rather than, folks switching to someone new.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really like, when you're looking at companies like Microsoft, they have a reputation for privacy and for, making sure that they're not putting things out there that are going to, leak company data in one way or another. But it is concerning where, I could potentially take a, internal document that's, highly private and send it, paste it into ChatGPT to ask it to rewrite part of it or summarize part of it. And now that's part of its information base that it's using to, do whatever. And, and I've actually asked ChatGPT itself, do you have the rights to the information, all the data that you're using? And it's like, we strive to, well, that's okay. I see what you're doing here. So there is a little bit of concern. And I do think that's where making sure you have that source of the data, maybe it's not a security risk, but it could surely be a privacy risk.
Yeah. And to be clear, as we talk about these formal engagements and integrations, that's where I feel like we're actually in pretty good shape. To your scenario, to me, that's a different factor on more a behavioral basis at the individual kind of employee or team member level. And I don't have a great answer there because, to your point, unless you're going to start DRMing, copy and pasting, or people taking pictures with their phone. I mean, you want to go extreme, someone can just screenshot or take a picture with something, OCR that, then dump it in there. Like the idea that we're going to be able to, kind of ring fence text is really tricky. And I don't have a great answer on how we're going to tackle that one yet.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you see as the next play for most companies? Let's say I wanted to start a new SaaS, company out there. I had this idea that I want to create a support ticketing system for companies to use, so you can have an IT system and integrate somehow with ChatGPT so that they could relieve, maybe some of their level 1 requests that come in, and have ChatGPT kind of respond on how to, or an AI model that we build or we develop, or we put some of our own, guardrails around it so that it's company specific on how to do certain tasks and, and things like that. We train the model a little bit ourselves. Where do you see that going? And what do you see as kind of like that next step?
Yes, I would fork that into two paths. First, for, listeners out there who are on the intrapreneur side, where they are in, large or established companies and they're trying to figure out the next level or the next step. There are plenty of ways to sandbox this tech to figure out what scenario you're going to unlock, what fidelity you're going to get, how efficient is this going to be. And the beauty of a lot of this tech is you don't need, huge numbers of humans. And so, some of this still requires, maybe a data scientist or applied science scientist or someone to kind of figure out how to kind of pull this all together, but you don't need a lot of people. And so, a 3 or 4 person team that goes out to go explore these can go figure out what the what the playbook is going to look like before you actually go pilot this with, maybe the more sensitive data. And so that's just something I like to underscore because, sometimes with big IT projects, you end up with this, kind of all or nothing attitude. And this is tech that you can go quickly figure out what your position is without, a ton of risk. And then you're kind of waiting, right? And so I wouldn't regulate this to kind of the innovation labs or something like that. But I do think a small internal team could do some interesting, things today. Now, to your, I think maybe more interesting question, if you were a new company, you're going to go start a company, let's use your support ticket system. I have a very opinionated approach, and this is how we evaluate opportunities at my company. And it starts kind of on a flipped basis. And so, and I've looked at this, again, from entrepreneur standpoint, from bootstrapping, from VC backed. I've done a VC backed startup myself. I've done multiple bootstrap companies, and the common thread there is, this idea, and this can sometimes work in consumer land. You'll see this on, maybe a Shark Tank type, concept, where someone scratched their own itch and they just kind of built this first. And I just don't believe that's sound advice for most SaaS companies. And so I have this flow. It's 4 steps. And the first step is choose your people and really figure out who your target customer is. Like, to the extent that you're willing to go out of business if that's not your customer. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a halo and kind of expand your segmentation over time, but really honing in and say, these are my people. This is the group that I deeply care about. And, for better or worse, you need to make sure that group has the money to spend to solve their problems. So you could pick an audience, but, this is the challenge with a lot of, products, SaaS products focused on small business. They either don't stick around, they can't afford it. There's all sorts of reasons that I would love to service small businesses more often, but they're just a really tricky customer to serve. But regardless, number one, you got to choose your people. Number two, acquire or build durable distribution. And so partnering with a company that provides distribution, this could be a one-off biz dev deal. This could be building an audience via an organic marketing channel, Twitter, LinkedIn, your podcast. These are all ways for folks to build trust. and you to aggregate the audience. And it can be, one, kind of one to many, kind of a newsletter format. It could be more community based. We're seeing folks with circle groups or Discord servers or private Slack groups. There's all sorts of ways where you can kind of build this audience. And then through that conversation with, real potential people, identify the pain point, leveraging that distribution channel as kind of the signal pipeline. And then number 4, finally, build and deliver. And this is, kind of, to me, the part that many builders get wrong. They start building things and they go hunting for people who have that problem. We've seen this for years, but it's more and more acute because it's so easy to build the product today. And to me, that's kind of the punchline, that you need to acquire distribution first, because that is your moat, especially if you're building a small or simple like CRUD application. A lot of those types of applications, they're just not that hard to replicate once you've proven out the UX model. And so your moat really becomes the community and audience you've built. And so I look at that flow: choose your people, build the distribution pipeline, find the pain point through those conversations, and then figure out what product you're going to sell. And lastly, the benefit of that approach is it makes it easy to create halo products or other types of features, because you're anchored on the audience first, not a specific product. So for your support ticketing system, there are a ton of these apps out there, right? But, let's say it was, something, for developers like Jira or Linear, or it was more, kind of IT support, a Zendesk type scenario. I would go figure out, who you're going to target. Maybe it's more vertical focused, so it's going to be support ticketing for a particular vertical. And then once that audience is assembled, aggregated, leverage those folks, again, not just for signal, but they also become your word of mouth. Like, that's how you get them to kind of test and pilot. And, your NPS survey should be out of the water because, they are in love with the product. And tying this back to the earlier part of the conversation, if you're leveraging the right AI tools and what have you, you're going to have enough trust for those customers, that audience, to go try things out that says, oh, would you like to connect this Postgres database to our service? Well, they're going to say, oh, this is John's company. I've been listening to his podcast. He's built this, incredible community. Yes, I will trust him. And that seems like maybe a small or trivial decision, but there's a huge amount of friction in that decision that goes away if there's a trusted and existing relationship. So that's kind of the flow I would tackle. And you have a great scenario for the ticketing system, because I think any existing SaaS product that's out there can be attacked right now with a much smaller team for anyone who can go and secure an audience.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there is build that audience, and it sounds like what you're also saying is like niche down on that audience, find out exactly what the specifics are. Don't go for I wouldn't say I want to build a ticketing system for all developers. Maybe I want to start out by niching down to a specific type of developers. Maybe just I don't know. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. Maybe WordPress developers or something like that if I'm doing well.
Yeah, and here's the reason I believe that's so important. As I stated earlier, there is a trend right now where I believe the biggest players are going to get bigger, and there's going to be room for expansion in the market for smaller players. But the mid-market is really tricky because you have most of the headaches of the large players, but you don't have all of their network effects. And so, Oracle or Salesforce or Microsoft, they have a world-class sales channel. And the reason you see so many companies getting either folded into them through acqui-hires, or they end up as roadkill because, Microsoft turned their company into a feature, is because they have superior distribution. And so anyone who feels that they're going to compete with the product that, serves everyone, they're now competing against that world-class sales channel. And I just think that's a dangerous place to play. And the beauty is that if you really nail your niche, it doesn't prevent you from growing from there. It just shifts that, focus from pure growth, where a venture-backed startup would look at and, start to think about, cash flow first. And I don't look at, bootstrap software companies as a dirty word. I believe that the shift to profitability is going to be here for many years because of the macroeconomic lines that we're seeing. And so even venture-backed companies are going to place more priority on profitability. And so just chasing market share, that was a great thing. We had a decade-long run of that. And I don't think the next 5 to 7 years is going to look the same.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're absolutely right. And you do see I've seen so many companies recently, where Apple just rolls out a new update to iOS and their app is no longer, valid. It's now a feature in iOS, and, their company's basically dead at this point.
Yeah, bingo.
Unless they have the ability to have that audience where they can pivot and capitalize on another pain point that audience is interested in.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the ticketing system, and inherent in a ticketing system is, humans who are trying to interact with each other, some type of process or workflow. Sometimes that's an approval, that's a review, what have you. As you think about some of the scenarios you're excited about, what's top of mind for you, or as you're talking to other guests, what are some of the patterns that you're observing?
So like for me, it's just a lot of the systems that we use and, developers have used for many years are frustratingly difficult. And Jira is one of them. So I'll throw that out there. It's
people love to hate all the Atlassian products. Yeah,
they do. Yeah. And I've been using Atlassian products for, at least 15 years. Anyway, it's just like one of those things where you can do so much with it. There's so many automation tools. Right now we do software approvals. We do all kinds of cool things that go through Jira. But my God, why does it have to be so complicated? There's so many things that I wish I could automate that I can't, that are small little pieces that have to go in and have a manual intervention that could just be automated. And there's lots of options to connect to other systems. And both systems have APIs. It's wouldn't be hard to put a connector in between there. Maybe something like Zapier could do that. I haven't researched it enough. But there's opportunities to simplify. And I think now one of the problems that I see a lot of SaaS companies get to is they have one simple, great product, and they expand on it and add features. And now it's a complex product that's very difficult. And they've lost that simplicity.
Yeah, what you're hitting on, and there's a great Hacker News thread you could probably find pretty quickly that talks about, why people love to hate on Jira. And the punchline is it's customizable to accommodate people, and people are messy. And that's at the core, right? You start to expand to different departments or different approaches. I've worked in all sorts of products, from SaaS products to video games to, OS level, products. And to simply say oh yeah, we're just this Scrum team, and, to pretend the same methodology works for every type of software that you might want to build, that's kind of silly. But also increasingly other departments, other disciplines are finding their way. And so, all right, how do your UX designers show up? How do your UR folks show up? How do you have some of these other roles? Governance is increasingly critical. So your accessibility, privacy, security, how do they get integrated to these systems? And so because of all of that, I think the bigger the company, the messier these things tend to get. And, again, that's one reason I'm so bullish on smaller companies, is because they can take very opinionated approaches to these types of tools and just say, everybody's going to work this way, and it's very easy to tackle. On the other side, I think there's a huge opportunity to figure out ways to, again, maybe it's an LLM or some other type of technology, but to accommodate all these different constituents across these very complicated workflows in large companies.
Yeah, for sure. And I know one of the things that we've been kind of looking at internally is just how can we take things that we're paying, whether it be like an Adobe Workfront for media, or Jira or something else. Is there something we can just automate through a Microsoft Forms and Power Automate and SharePoint and just knock it out and be a piece of cake? And then we can seamlessly integrate it into our intranet and make it part of Teams or something like that, so it's a simpler approach and people aren't having to jump back and forth from different systems.
Yeah, I mean, the Teams interface to me is the best place to start. You had asked that question earlier. Mm-hmm. Whether you use Slack or Teams, most companies are going to be using one of those two. That is the place not to try to rebuild the chat interface. And the beauty of Power Automate is that you have, webhooks and other things you can put auth tokens in the payloads and other types of, kind of standards-based approaches. So it doesn't have to sit inside the Microsoft ecosystem. And so, you could stand up a really simple, instance, be a little serverless type job. And this could sit in any cloud, right? Azure, AWS, GCP, and you could run this on a VPS if you're, not an enterprise company. But regardless of where you run this thing, you would be able to kind of use that as your proxy and kind of, traffic these things back and forth as you're experimenting. And again, the security implications and or privacy implications are things to think about, but there's so many ways to quickly try these things out that don't require a software engineer. And, I've taught, non-technical PMs, how to use some of these tools in a half a day. And, there's always a little bug or something they introduce, but the idea that, the time investment is hours, like maybe in aggregate, it's 20 hours. Like to me, that's transformative because it gives almost anyone the power to automate their business if they, are motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with a lot of the low code tools that even Microsoft's putting out, like Power Apps, it makes it so easy to go out and, like one of the use cases that we were looking at is digital signs, for instead of paying, the service fee that we do now, like what is it, like $9 a month per sign for all of our conference rooms, we could just create a Power App that reads into our Exchange calendars and is set up that way and not cost anything. It's part of the free features.
Well, and what you just hit on, like it does cost something, but it's already rolled into part of your P&L. And that's the way I think entrepreneurs should be looking at this. Go, back to my framework where it's like, choose your people, find your people first, go study the P&Ls of that class of customer. And in today's world, especially as folks are increasingly concerned about their spend, they want more ROI on, everything, every dollar that goes out, and just look at the existing P&L and don't think about incrementally adding like, we're going to do this great, augmented reality project that's going to transform the way you do training. Okay, well, don't make that a new line item. If you even think that will work, go tackle the training budget, right? And like find the existing spend. I think that's really, really important. And even better, find spends that are compulsory. And, by that, I mean something that someone has to spend to stay in business versus the nice to haves. And this is the tension between some operational costs, kind of R&D costs and sales and marketing. If you have sales and marketing activities that don't have any real ROI, they're just going to get cut for a lot of companies nowadays because, they're folks are under pressure. But, people are not going to cancel their insurance policy. They're not going to, stop their folks from communicating with each other. So just look for those compulsory spends. And I think those are interesting places to either, to your scenario, which I love, is just find something you're already spending and use a tool to get rid of that spend if you're on the buyer side. And if you're on the seller side, just tackle things that don't fit that scenario that are more required than nice to haves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great advice. So you mentioned, kind of where this all goes, like the large companies like Alphabet and Microsoft and Amazon getting bigger, and, some of the mid-size having a lot of challenge, but the smaller companies also growing, having more of those. Is that where you see things going? And how long are we talking about on a timeline for maybe this all happening?
Yeah. I was talking to a friend who they run a fund that's around $100 million. So it's not a massive fund, but they have enough capital. And we're talking about how his entire check size is being rethought because, what would have been, maybe a $500,000 pre-seed, a 3 to 5 million seed, you might be able to stabilize some of these companies moving forward with $5 million, where that's all the capital they need through their whole raise. And so the bar for, and this is how I kind of look at, investing as an angel when I do those types of deals. Every time I'm writing a check, there are a set of experiments that I'm expecting that founding team to go execute. And then if they meet those, they deliver against those experiments, even if they don't all work, that's the conversation to drive the next tranche of funding, for their next round. And increasingly, those check sizes they're just getting smaller because the teams are getting smaller. And when you don't have to start up a company and then say, oh, now we need to hire these 8 salespeople. No, now we only need 1 or 2. That is just going to be super transformative. And so, I believe the vertically focused areas are super interesting. So if, someone has a background in oil and gas, I don't have a deep expertise on regulated industries like healthcare, but there's some really interesting things there. These businesses typically have very long sales cycles. And when you have a long sales cycle and expensive salespeople, that's a recipe for you needing to raise a lot of money. But if you can reduce that burn, you're going to be able to stay alive much longer. And so I see a number of these vertical industries that don't want a generic CRM, don't want a generic back office, don't want a generic, supply chain or logistics managing solution. Those to me are the areas that historically have been unprofitable for the large players and kind of super risky for the middle players, that these small, and when I say small, largely I'm talking about 12 people or less, like really tiny companies. Wow. But you could argue, these are, kind of tapping out at 30, 40 people. These are small companies that, historically, a CFO is like, I'm not going to bet this workload on this tiny little company. You guys might go out of business. And we are seeing folks starting to make those bets on those smaller players because the data is interoperable and it's not like it's going to be locked up and they can't transition. So as long as there's that migration plan, that's the contingency. And all of these, plus that data interoperability, are unlocking the opportunity for these smaller companies to have a run at this.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I totally agree with you on that. And I think when you look at those, the ability for those small companies to really thrive right now, I mean, man, there's so many tools out there that didn't exist 10 years ago that will make that so much easier and so much quicker. And the ability to, I remember back pre-COVID, it's like a lot of vendors wanted to come to your office, or, you would do Zooms occasionally, but they wanted this face-to-face type thing. And then COVID happened, and now it's very, very common for, to do complete deals and never meet a person, and, the company in person is
100%. And the counterpoint to all of this, I try to push myself, is most of these small companies are not going to work, right? But the reason that's okay is if you look at the aggregated check size to go fund, let's say you funded 100 of these companies, right, at 1 to 2 million. So let's say just say, keep the math simple. There's 100 companies, 2 million each, and so now there's 200 million into this. It's not uncommon for 1 to 3 unicorn companies to have raised that much capital. And so just the portfolio distribution of that and, really smart driven, founders, I think we're going to have a more interesting class and vintage of products that come out of the next 3 to 5 years, because so many more folks will, be able to push and bring their vision to life, where before you had to kind of keep, putting your follow-on funds on the folks who had the most momentum, but secretly their board or their C-suite could be imploding. Their churn rate for their employees could be bad. Like, the product could be okay, but they could have all this organizational dysfunction, and you had no choice but to double down there because that was all that was left in the pipeline. And so this idea that we can make so many more bets, I think just mathematically we're going to get a more resilient set of companies out of this as a result.
Yeah, that sounds exactly right. Well, LaSean, I really appreciate having you on. I feel like I've learned a lot about these new tools and what's coming down the pipeline, and the importance of small businesses right now and in the future. Thanks for coming on the show. How can people connect with you online and maybe learn more about what you guys are doing and go from there?
Number one, thanks for having me. Great conversation. This is top of mind for us, so great to talk to others who are also thinking about it. Folks can find me individually on Twitter at LaSean, that's LaSean. And if anyone wants to talk about what we do at CAGR, it's CAGR.com, CAGR.com. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some T-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.